Hello, welcome to this TikTok session. My name is Thiago Soares and I will present to you some new features on the TRIRIGA platform 3.5.2. When the UX framework was first released, we provided a triplet graphic element to render a floor plan in a UX application. That element came with some plugins that allowed us to interact to that graphic, like zooming in and out, selecting a space, and highlighting the space. For this new release, we added two more cool features for the graphics. Now we can use pins to locate a person, an asset, or any other entity in the floor plan. The another feature enables the developer to create a legend that controls how the graphics are highlighted based on an attribute of the spaces. In this training, I will drive you on how to use the new elements to add pins to a graphic and how to apply a dynamic legend to a graphic. Let's first explain how to add a pin. A pin is an icon placed in the graphic to denote the location of any entity. To grok what I am talking about here, let's switch to a demo application. This application shows the floors of a specific building. We are showing the floor plan for the floor 1. Each person and assets located in that floor is denoted by a pin. For example, this pin denotes that we have a person located in this space. When we click that pin, it shows a tooltip containing the name of that space, that in this case is room 1203, and the name of the person that's located in that space. This pin denotes that we have an asset located in this space. Clicking on it, it shows that we have a printer on that space. If there is more than one entity in the same space, a multiple pin will appear. A multiple pin, it's a pin that has a counter number inside it, indicating how many items are located in that space. In this example, we have a multiple pin indicating that we have 4 items. These 4 items can be persons or assets or a mix of different entities. In this case, we have 3 persons and 1 asset in the same space. If we switch to the floor 2, we can easily see that that floor has 2 persons located in that floor. If we switch to the floor 3, we can see that that floor has no person or asset located there. It is very easy to add a pin to an existing graphic. There is a new element called triplat-graphic pin that can be added as an inner element of the triplet graphic. The triplet graphic pin has 2 mandatory properties. The first is the icon property, that we pass the name of the icon for the pin. The second is the pins property, that receives an array of the entities to be pinned on the graphic. The record ID attribute name property must be set to the attribute that contains the space ID where the entity is located. In this example, the record ID attribute name property is set to space ID, and the space ID attribute in the object contains the ID where Jonathan is located. When we click the pin on the graphic, it shows a tooltip containing a label and the space name where the pin is located. The label is defined by the label attribute name that must be set to the name of the attribute that contains the label. In this case, the label will come from the name attribute that contains the name of the person, in this case Jonathan. And the space name comes from the space attribute name. In this case, it is set to space name. that is an attribute of the object that contains the name of the space where the Jonathan is located. Now let's open the source code for the demo application. We can see here a simple triplet graphic configuration that contains the zoomable and the label features. Running the code, we can see the demo app. Each floor shows a simple graphic that has no pins. Now let's add pins on the graphic for all persons located in the current floor. The first step is to query all the persons using a triplat-ds element. The data source find people in floor runs a query that returns all the persons located in a specific floor. The data source returns 4 fields: the ID of the floor, the name of the person, the ID of the space where the person is located, and the space name. Now that we have the list of the persons, let's declare the triplet graphic pin element. The first attribute that we need to set is the icon. We can provide the name of any icon in the arrow icon, triplet icon, or in a custom icon library. The triplet icon set has some icons that were designed specifically to be used as a pin. We are going to use the pin person icon that represents a person. We configure the pins property to receive the people list returned by the triplat-ds. Now we need to set the data source field that contains the space IDs where is located each person. The label attribute name property gets the field that contains the name of the person, and the space attribute name property gets the field that contains the space name. By running the updated demo application, we can see that all persons located in the selected floor appears in the graphic as a pin. We can select the pin to see the names of the persons located in that space. And if we change to another floor, we see that that floor has 2 persons. Now let's change the code to show each asset located in the selected floor as a pin on the graphic. We can repeat the same steps we did for the persons pin. First, we need to query all the assets located in the floor by using a triplat-ds element. After that, we can declare another triplet graphic pin, set the icon to pin asset, and set the pins property to the asset list returned by the triplat-ds that we declared. The other attributes must be set in the same way that we did for the persons pin. Now, if we run again the demo application, we will see that the asset pins appears in the floor plan. We can see here that we have an asset located in this space and another asset located in this another space. And in this space here, we have 4 items. 3 of them are persons and 1 is an asset. Now I will present to you how to apply a dynamic legend to a graphic. A graphic legend is a component that controls the spaces that are highlighted on the graphic based on a specific space attribute. It is dynamic. The user can select only the criteria that he wants to view highlighted on the graphic. The graphic legend also enables the users to show and hide the pins that are displayed on the graphic. To understand what I am talking about here, I will show to you the demo application using a graphic legend. Now the demo application has a graphic legend that is highlighting the spaces on the floor plan. The legend is collapsed here. If you click the bar, it opens and shows what is the space attribute criteria that I am using to highlight the space. In this case, I want to highlight the space by organization. I can deselect all, and for example, I want to see only the spaces that belongs to the planning and resources organization, and it will highlight only that space. If I want to also highlight the research space, I click here and it will highlight the spaces that belongs to that organization. It's dynamic because the user can select and deselect the criterions, and we can have many criterions that we want. In this case, I created a show by organization and by occupancy status. In this case, if I click the occupancy status, it will highlight the spaces that are vacant, each ones are occupied, and each ones are vacant common, for example. There is another option in the graphic legend that allows us to enable or disable the pins on the graphic. So if I want to hide all the pins, I just click here and all the pins goes out. If I want to see only the asset pins, I click here and it will show only the asset pins. If you want to add a graphic legend to your application, you need to use the triplat-graphic-legend element that was created. This element is independent from the triplet graphic, and we don't need to add it as a child of the triplet graphic, like we did for the pin. The legend delegates the responsibility for highlighting the space on a graphic to the triplet graphic highlight group. So whenever we want to use the triplet graphic legend, we also need to use the triplet graphic highlight group. And the attributes that connect these two elements are the legend space. The legend space are computed by the legend and set out in this property. And the legend space is sent to the highlight group that receive the spaces and highlight the spaces selected by the user in the legend. The graphic legend contains 3 sections: the location pins, the show by, and the filter by section. Each section is configured by its own element, and we will detail each of these elements now. The first section that I will present to you is the show by section. The show by section is the main section of the legend. It controls the spaces that are highlighted in a graphic. It is composed by a list of show by rows, and each show by row highlights the spaces based on the content of a particular space attribute. So we can have a show by occupancy status, we can have a show by charge to organization, we can have a show by space class, and the user and the developers can create another show bys. So inside a graphic legend, we can have one or more triplet graphic legend show by elements. Each one will define a row that highlight the spaces based on a specific attribute. In this example, we have 2 show by inside this legend, one that highlight the spaces based on the occupancy status, and the other that highlight the spaces based on the organization. The Criteria lists for a show by are dynamically defined based on the content of a particular space attribute. The space attribute that will be used is defined by the attribute property of the triplat-graphic-legend show by. In this example, the attribute used is the occupancy status. We also need to set the color by property that will have the name of the attribute that has the color for that occupancy status. In this example, the color by property has the value occupancy status color. Now I am going to show how to add a simple graphic legend that has just one show by section. The first step is to query all the spaces in the selected floor by declaring a triplat-ds element and using the all spaces in floor data source that I have previously created. The next step is to declare the triplat-graphic-legend element. We need to set the spaces property of the triplat-graphic-legend to the space list variable returned by the triplat-ds that we just created. The legend spaces property will contain the computed list of the space to be highlighted. We will bind it to the legend spaces variable for a later use. Inside the legend, we can insert one or more show by elements. We add the show by to highlight the spaces based on the organization associated to the space. The attribute property must be set to the data source field that contains the name of the organization associated with the space. The color by property must be set to the data source field that contains the color of the organization associated. And we will set the label to organization. The triplat-graphic-legend always needs to work in conjunction with a highlight group inside the triplat-graphic. So I'm going to add the triplat-graphic highlight group element inside the triplat-graphic and connect both elements by setting the legend space array that was generated by the legend. The last step is to style the legend. I want the legend to be over the graphic when the legend is opened. So I will add some CSS style to position the legend on the right of the graphic and over the graphic. Let's run again the demo application. Now we can see that a gray bar appears to the right of the graphic. When we click that bar, the legend appears, and the legend has just the show by section with one row, labeled organization. When we select the organization, it will show all the organizations associated with the spaces in the current floor plan. If I select one or more organizations, it will highlight the space associated to that organizations. I can select all and deselect all. We can change the code to the organization be pre-selected when the application is first run. And we also can change the code to all the criteria be selected when we select the organization. So let's do it now. Okay, let's return to the source code. I want to add 3 enhancements to the legend. The first enhancement is I want the organization show by be pre-selected when the applications first run. So I can go to the legend and use the show by selected property. This property contains the label of the selected show by. By setting it to organization, the legend will show the organization pre-selected. The second enhancement that we can do is when I select the show by, I want all the criteria inside it, in this case all the organizations, be selected. So I want to select the organization, and in this case all the organizations be pre-selected also. I can just add the show all checked property. So whenever they use check the organization show by row, all the criteria will also be selected. The last enhancement that we can do, there are some spaces that does not have any organization associated to them. When we select the show by organization and the space does not have an organization associated to it, the space will not be highlighted. If I want to highlight all the spaces that does not satisfy any criteria, I can add the property show empty criterion. And I can also say what will be the label of that criteria in the legend. In this case, I will say no org. Running the updated demo application, we can see that when we selected a floor, the spaces are highlighted by default. That is happening because the legend is pre-selected with the organization show by. Whenever the user deselect the organization and select it again, all the criteria will be selected. The user in this case can deselect one or more, deselect all the criteria and select just the ones he wants to highlight. For example, the research organization. The other difference that we see now is that all the space that is not associated with organization, now it's highlighted in gray because we have this criteria called no org. So if I want to highlight only the space that's not associated with organization, I just click the no org and it will highlight the spaces in gray. The second section of the graphic legend is the filter by section. A filter gets the spaces that satisfy the selected show by criteria and filters out the spaces that does not satisfy the selected filter by. The filter by alone cannot highlight the space. It always works in conjunction with the show by. So the user needs to first select a show by and after that select a filter by. Each filter by row is defined by a triplat-graphic-legend filter by element that is defined inside the graphic legend. The list of the criteria for a filter by is dynamically defined based on the content of a particular space attribute. It's similar to the show by. The attribute property of the filter by defines the name of the space attribute that will be used. In this case, for example, I want to create a filter by space class. So I am specifying that the attribute of the space is the space class name. That is the name of the attribute that exists in the space object returned by the data source. Now I will add a filter by space class to the graphic legend. I am declaring the triplat-graphic-legend filter by. I will set the attribute to the name of the data source field that contains the space class name for each space. I set the label to space class and set the attribute filter all checked. So when the filter is selected by the user, all the criteria is also selected. Let's return to the demo app. Now I will open the legend and we see that we have the show by section and we have here the filter by section with one row that is the space class. If I click the space class, it shows all the space class associated to the spaces in the selected floor. The filter by will filter out all the spaces that does not satisfy the selected criterions. For example, I want to see only the spaces that are emitting, that has a emitting space class. So I can deselect the others, and only the spaces that are emitting is highlighted on the graphic. We can see that these spaces has the emitting space class and belongs to the planning and resources organization. This space is also emitting, and this one is also emitting. The last section that we can add to the graphic legend is the location pin section. The location pins enables the user to show and hide the pins in the floor plan. It's possible to the user to hide or show all the pins or just the selected ones. Inside a triplat-graphic-legend, we can have 0 or more triplat-graphic-legend pins. Each one will control the visibility of one pin type. The triplat-graphic-legend pin delegates the responsibility for hiding and showing the pins on the graphic to a triplat-graphic pin plugin. In this example, we have the legend with 2 triplat-graphic-legend pins. Each one has the checked property binded to a variable that is used by the enable property of the triplat-graphic pin element. Let's now return to the code and add to the legend a location pin to control the visibility of the people pin and asset pin. First, I will declare a triplat-graphic-legend pin. I will set label to people. I will set the icon to pin person, the same icon that I used to the person's pin. And I will bind the checked property to the variable called people pin enabled. Now I have to link the legend pin to the graphic pin. The graphic pin that adds the person's pin, I will add the enabled property and set it to the same variable binded to the checked property. In this case, the people pins enabled. I will repeat the steps to add a location pin in the legend to control the visibility of asset pin. I will set the label to asset, the icon to pin asset, the same icon used to the asset pins, and bind the checked property to the asset pin enabled. Now let's link the legend pin to the graphic pin, setting the enabled property of the graphic pin to the same variable binded to the checked property. In this case, the asset pin enabled. Running and again the demo application. If we open the graphic legend, now we see that we have one more section called the location pins. If I expand the section, I see one checkbox for the people pins and another for the asset. If I want to hide all the pins, I click here and all the pins are hidden on the graphic. If I want to see only the asset pins, I click here and only the asset pins are shown on the graphic. If I want to see only the person pin, I click and see only that type of pin. So that's it for today. We covered the basic of setting up a graphic pin and a graphic legend. Please check the reference links for additional material. Thanks for watching. I will see you next time.